Hi, I'm Tim Hungerford. Recently I did a webinar on remotely managing fraud during a crisis. I hope you'll enjoy it. I'm going to do a little bit of overview today on fraud before we dive into some specific areas. So when we're remotely managing fraud, some of the types of frauds that we're going to look at, and I'm going to grab the percentages from the ACFE Occupational Fraud Report 2020 that just came out for this. So financial statement fraud, looking for manipulation of the financials, very costly, usually about $1 million an incident. Less common than most other frauds, 2% by itself. Asset misappropriation, that theft and embezzlement and larceny of our cash and our assets, that's less costly per incident, usually about $100,000 per event. Most commonly occurs, about 52% of all frauds are asset misappropriation, again, by themselves. And then you've got corruption, bribes, extortion, and kickbacks. Each incident is probably around $200,000 in most of the cases that were reviewed, and 11% of those cases. So that obviously doesn't add up to 100%. So asset misappropriation and corruption was about 26% of the cases, so that's pretty significant. Asset misappropriation and financial statement fraud together, 3%. Financial statement fraud and corruption, about 1%. And then all three of them in the same fraud, that's about 5%. So you can see the big deal is really asset misappropriation. And about 86% of all frauds wind up being related to asset misappropriation. And yet, depending on the size of your company, some of these dollar amounts might seem small or fall under the windows of what people are looking at, or rounding, again, depending on your financials and how big you are. So we're going to try to put some things together to try to look at that during a crisis. And part of looking at a crisis, we go into the triangle. You know, the historical fraud triangle is rationalization, justifying why why you did the fraud, the opportunities there to do the fraud. You've got a broken down segregation of duties or something that allows you to commit that fraud, and then some sort of financial pressure or incentive that you've got to do that fraud. Those are the fraud triangle, but the reality of it is opportunity without opportunity, it's hard to commit a fraud, so that's kind of the key one. And then I know some people say, well, fraud triangle's been around a while, there's been some modifications, and there is. The fraud diamond came out, in which really they took opportunity and split it up into capability. And I guess if you look at it like you're in the grocery line, and of course you're 6 feet apart from the person in front of you, and they drop $100 bill on the ground, you might be able to come up with a reason why you want to pick that up and be incented by it. Uh, and it's the opportunity because it's sitting right there in front of you. So now are you capable? And I guess the first thing is, can you bend down and pick up that $100 bill? And I don't know about you, but I probably put on a couple quarantine pounds, but I can still bend down and pick up that $100 bill. The next part of capability was, would I keep it? Am I capable of putting in my pocket and pretending I didn't get it there, or will I let that person in front of me know that that's their $100 that they dropped? So that's part of the capability. And then in 2011, Crow Horvath came up with the fraud pentagon, and the pentagon added arrogance into it, or ego, and along with that competence. So they really split capability up into those two segments of, am I competent to commit that fraud? Am I arrogant or enough to commit that fraud? And then in the last 2 years, there's been the fraud hexagon. So what the difference there is, arrogance is now ego. We've got capability back into the equation, but we've added collusion. And if you'll notice, it spells out, starting with stimulus, which is your incentive or your pressure, score. So it's the score model, SCCORE, as far as the ability to commit fraud. But at the end of the day, it still all goes back to rationalization, pressure, and opportunity. So in a crisis, rationalization will increase, I deserve to be taken care of. I need to feed my family. The government is not doing the right thing. Opportunity will also present itself, or capability in the sense that controls might get removed or changed out of the normal operational flow that we've set up or that we've had in place. Now, out of necessity, they've been changed. Now, that individual has opportunity where they didn't have it before. And then, of course, pressure. With everything that's going on, people might have lack of cash, fear of job loss, and from a corporate perspective, missing targets that you're expected to hit. And if I'm a manager and I'm supposed to hit targets, that might be a pressure I've got, especially in a crisis mode that we've got going on. So from that, I came up with 3 possible frauds that are really out there. The essential fraud, just like we have essential workers, right? Well, we've got essential fraud, and I'll dive into these a little bit further. But then we've got a new fraud that occurs, and then we've got what I'll call fraud in quarantine.